Howdy, everyone. As he said, I'm Brett Martin, and thank you so much for having me here today. I'll apologize in advance. My Russian isn't very good. All I've got is privet and bolshi piva pozalusta. It's where I'm at. So thank you. So here's the game plan for today. I'm going to give you guys a quick overview of myself. Then I'm going to give you a quick overview of my last business. And then we're going to talk about the lessons learned from that. And I'm going to try to get through the material as quickly as possible so we leave a lot of time for Q&A, okay? So first, who am I? I'm a 3-time founder. Each time has been less bad than the last. I've done a bunch of things. I've worked on Wall Street. I've lived on a sailboat for a year. I lived in Italy for a year, and I'm not actually 103. All those things are, I've done a bunch of other things that aren't going to be much use for you guys. So before I go to Sonar, I guess who in here, quick poll, who in here is an entrepreneur? All right, got a couple. Who in here someday thinks they might one day be an entrepreneur? A couple more. Okay, so this presentation is for you guys. So has anyone heard of Sonar? Oh, yes. Lucky gentleman here. Okay, so my last business was called Sonar. And basically, it was part of this ambient social networking phase. It was a really simple app. You downloaded it. You signed into it through Facebook, Foursquare, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, any of your social networks, and then you put it away. And then the idea was it would buzz in your pocket whenever your friend was nearby. So we had some moderate success. We had a couple million users on it. We were distributed by Apple and Google into 150 plus countries. We raised $2 million in venture capital from some of the best VCs and angels in New York and San Francisco. We were covered by New York Times, Time Magazine, Wired Magazine, any other technology journal you've ever heard of. And we failed. Completely, utterly. So there's a lot of other, I'm not going to be like all the other presenters that you may see here, very accomplished success stories. I'm here to tell you about what not to do. So I've got a lot of experience doing that. Okay, so here's a quick agenda. We're going to walk through product market fit and some of the things that you might screw up around that, time wasters, all the things that you shouldn't be doing, how to think about people, and then generally what is the existential questions you might run up to when you start your next business. Okay, so right when we launched, so I'll jump right into it. So a lot of people talk about, false negatives and false positives. How do you listen to your users, right? How do you build something that people want? That's what Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, which is probably the most famous incubator, always says. Startups are very simple. They're simple, build something people want. Unfortunately, that's quite hard to do. So when we launched Sonar, we launched at TechCrunch Disrupt in May 2011 to a fair amount of fanfare. In an audience something like this today, in front of 10,000 people, we unveiled our product, and people were, piling accolades on us, sending us press. I was being flown around. One of the first things that people asked for us for was they said, oh, this is great. You have Facebook, you have Twitter, you have Foursquare integration, but really, I want to use Sonar for professional networking. I want to use it at conferences like this so that I can, network with the people in the room. So they said, you should add LinkedIn. So obliged, listening to our users, we quickly added LinkedIn, spent the next 3 months adding LinkedIn. Guess what happened? Absolutely nothing. No one cared. So the lesson learned here is if I would use your product if only it had X feature is a very dangerous signal to follow. Much like entrepreneurs, your users who want you to succeed will often take guesses about what they want, but they don't always know what they want. So there's 2 very simple solutions for this. If you're an enterprise company, you're selling something to businesses, you should ask your customers for money first. Lots of customers will talk about this, they want this, but when you ask them to put their money where their mouth is, that's when they tell you what they really want. If you're a consumer products company like Sonar and you don't have any intention of asking your users for money, it's a little harder, but that's when you have to double down on analytics and see what users are actually doing. That takes us to the second lesson, false negatives. So while trying to listen to users, one of the things people were constantly asking us for was, we want a map. when you use Sonar, you could check in throughout the app, and everyone was clamoring for some sort of map to post to their Facebook or Twitter feeds. And we said, yeah, we made designs for it, but you know what? We're too busy inventing the future of social networking. We're gonna, this is gonna be the next Facebook. We know what you want, okay? So instead, we spent all these hours whiteboarding all these great ideas for all these features that we never built, instead of just building a damn map like our users asked us. So you know what happened to that? Instead, we added this stupid little text string called @Sonar at the end of your Facebook and Twitter posts. People hated it. There's links, there's web pages, there's tons of user forums talking about how much people hated this. And what happened was no one clicked on it. People stopped sharing. Facebook noticed that no one was clicking on the links that were shared from our app, so Facebook started hiding it. And so we ended up losing all of our distribution. So lesson learned here was, always focus on actual user behavior. What are people actually using your app for? And then do everything you can to get the hell out of the way. Remove the friction. If they're checking in, if that's what they're doing and that's what they want to do more of, just make it easier to do that and stop dreaming about sort of castles in the sky and all the things you might do 5 years from now. Just make it easier for people to use your app today. So metrics that matter. A lot of smart people, when we were building Sonar, there's this constant debate. Who's working on consumer products? Right? Okay, so have you guys had this debate about should we build growth-oriented features or should we build engagement-oriented features, right? So I'm not going to tell you growth or engagement's better. If you're building a social network and your plan is to raise venture capital, I would implore you to focus on what are the metrics that venture capitalists care about. Because if you need to raise money for to keep funding your project, then you're going to need venture capitalists, and you should know what are the metrics that they care about. So lots of smart people told us to focus on engagement. We did that. We improved engagement by orders of magnitude. We had a 3-month retention rate of over 60%, which anyone who builds social apps knows that's pretty damn high. And guess what? No one cared. Right? So the point here is if you're going to know what metrics matter to your business and then focus on those. That's easier said than done. All right. So this entire next section is about things that I wasted time on that I wish I had not. Sam Altman, he was the founder of, I can't even remember what it was called. Sam Altman. Does anyone know what Sam Altman? He's one of the partners of Y Combinator now. He founded one of the original sort of location-based services. Can't even remember what it's called now. He had a tweet the other day that I thought was really interesting. He goes, I think all startup advice boils down to one thing. It says, figure out what's important and then ignore the rest. I think that's pretty damn good advice. And so here are some things that I wasted a bunch of time on. No offense to the CodeFest, but events. I mean, this is not a waste of time, let me assure you. But in general, I think especially consumer-facing companies think that events are going to be a place where they're going to go and present their new app and get all of you guys to download my latest app and get to 10 million users. It's not going to happen. Events come to put things like this. They're here for business development. They're here to help you hire, and they're here to help you refine your pitch. They're not here to get you to 10 million users. I recognize this one night. It was about 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night. I was at some small meetup with about this many people at it, and I was so tired. I was carrying my sign in my bag, and I was walking out of the room trying not to scare anyone with my sign, and I was just dodging people who were running up to me, not asking me about Sonar, but asking me to install their app. I realized this is a bad distribution strategy. So events, be careful. Okay, second thing is brands. So when we launched Sonar, within a week, I had MTV, Kraft, Unilever, VH1, CNN, all of these big, huge, amazing brands were shooting me emails. So, of course, I obliged. I said, "Yeah, let's meet. Let's meet in the Rockefeller Center, and with these long conference rooms with 10 people from MTV on each side." And so, at first, it took about 10 meetings for me to realize I was like, "Oh, they want to put Sonar in front of their audience. Like, this is going to be a great opportunity for distribution." It took about 10 meetings to realize that they didn't actually care about giving us any of their users. They were just keeping tabs on us to make sure that if we ever became the next Facebook, they had a good relationship. It was a sore realization. So the point with brands is, you should be polite, but don't count on them for getting you to 10 million users. Say, thanks, love to connect. We'll connect with you once we've built the thing that works. Come back, and then they'll come to you and actually bring money. You know when they're offering you money, they're serious. Side projects. So in the winter of, does anyone read Wired? Anyone? Oh my God. Wired was like, the magazine that everyone read, right? Growing up, I was like, oh, someday I'm going to be in Wired. So in the winter of 2011, when I had an opportunity to partner with Wired magazine, they have an annual pop-up store in New York City in Times Square. We had an opportunity to partner with them, and we basically built this thing where you'd come in to the store and Sonar would analyze all of your social media accounts, your Facebook presence, your Foursquare presence, your LinkedIn presence, and then we would use that data to make personalized product recommendations for the items in the store. I mean, it's pretty cool, right? So this side project, which I thought, this will just take us a couple of days, it ended up costing us 6 weeks, and we ended up building nothing of a value to Sonar, and we got nothing out of it other than the experience of hanging out with the Wired people. So the idea is, when you're a Sonar, when you're a startup, you have limited resources. So make a plan, come up with your top 3 things, and then forget about the second 2 and 3 because you're never going to get to them. You got one bullet in the chamber, use it wisely. So competition. Has anyone heard of Highlight? No? Banjo? No? Glancy? No? Okay. So when we launched in May 2011, there were about we launched May 2011, and then leading up to South by Southwest, which is a big technology conference in Austin, Texas, about 60 other competitors. I used to have this spreadsheet of competitors, and then I had added so many people to it that I finally just stopped. And I was like, I can't even handle this. And so leading into South by, which is the big technology conference every year in the US, one of our competitors, which was called Highlight, had been invested in by Michael Arrington. You guys, who's Michael Arrington? This guy. Thank God I've got you, because no one else is raising their hand. Okay, you were at TechCrunch. All right. So TechCrunch, Michael Arrington is the founder of TechCrunch. And so he had invested in this competitor of ours called Highlight. And basically, South by Southwest, the idea, Twitter launched there in 2007. Foursquare launched there in 2008. This product called GroupMe launched there in 2009. These dates are wrong. But basically, it was like the place where every new, social service was unveiled. So our year, the press, who's always looking for something to talk about, had decided that ambient social networking, which was the space that we had started along with these other companies, was going to be the year. So we were going to be the breakout service, but it was a big competition, right? And so Arrington and a bunch of Silicon Valley insiders who had invested in our competitor basically had worked with the press and decided that Highlight was going to be the champion. So they launched right about 2 months before the conference, and the press was just talking them up, and TechCrunch every day was talking about how they were going to win. And, we saw this, and my stomach was just rotting on the inside. And I was thinking to I put on my smile and I went into work every day and I for my team, I said, no, we're good. We've got this, we're going to do this. And, we had the similar features to theirs on our roadmap. So we reordered our roadmap and we changed around our direction. And, we said, okay, we need to respond to this threat. I still remember flying to Austin. I was in the plane getting ready and we had all these events and conferences and, TV interviews lined up, and I remember thinking in my stomach, I said, fuck, we had it, and now we've lost it. So who's heard of Highlight again? Yeah, no one. Exactly. So the point is that all of that ringing and hand-wringing and nervousness and moving around was complete waste of time and energy. Right? So who in here has been afraid of a competitor? Okay, come on. Yeah, I see you guys waving your hands. Russians not afraid of anything. I see. Okay, so an interesting thing I learned about this is that the only way that a startup competitor can kill another startup is by getting in its head and then driving it off a cliff and then following that other startup off a cliff, right? Because if you want to know, here's one reason not to be afraid. So if you have competitors, first off, do you know what your customers really want? This is pre-product market fit. Do you know what your customers want? Probably not. If you knew what they wanted, then you'd already have traction and you wouldn't be sitting here. You'd be sitting on your pile of money, right? But if you don't know what your customers want, are your competitors releasing similar features? Yes, they usually are, right? Well, they don't know what the hell your customers want either. So you should just get back to work figuring out what customers want. So don't worry too much about competitors. They're way less dangerous than you think. This is probably my favorite waste of time. So after our space, so South by, basically the entire tech world was focused on us. And then Highlight, the much hyped competitor, they destroyed everyone's batteries. So, your iPhone probably doesn't last very long anyway. But in South by Southwest, everyone had 5 different apps that were monitoring your location at every second, like Sonar. And everyone's battery died before noon. Needless to say, this did not get rave reviews, and there was a massive backlash against our space. It was a little bit ahead of our time. So everyone's batteries ran out, and the tech press turned us from darlings into hating us. So our space just completely froze off. We went from being the talk of the town to literally not an investor, couldn't even get on the phone with an investor. So some of the investors in Sonar that had a controlling stake decided, you know what, it's time to sell the company. So I spent about 2 months arguing with them and saying, no, I don't want to sell the company. And they're like, we can sell the company. We can make $10, $15 million selling the company. And I was like, I don't know. I don't think we're going to make $10, $15 million. And they're like, well, we're just going to fire you and replace you. And I was like, okay, let's make $15 million. So I spent the next 9 months. They had a contact at Living Social. You guys know Living Social? Groupon? Okay, Groupon's biggest competitor in the US. They had contact there. We spent all this time basically taking our technology, which was an intelligent client-side technology, and this big data backend. We were built on Scala. Who knows Scala? Yeah, you got some Scala. So we were on Scala framework, a real-time processing framework called Storm. We used Hadoop for some batch processing, but we used Scala, Storm, Scalding. Basically, we had 300 million people that every day we were monitoring their daily motions. So we were tracking billions of location data points. So our bright plan was to take this backend and wrap it into this B2B package for Living Social to use, right? Take our technology and sell it into this business. Because, it was going to be so easy. We're just going to take this big technology and sell it right into this big company. It was going to be easy. We had 9 months of meetings, dozens of meetings. And while we should have been paring back our team and reducing our burn to extend our runway, instead we were staffing up. We added a data scientist, we added 2 more backend engineers, we had a team of 14. We were spending $60,000 a month in Amazon Web Services. I think that's like, 240,000 rubles? No. 2.4 million rubles a month or something like that. I mean, I'm talking a lot of fucking rubles in Amazon Web Services, right? And we tried to sell in. Needless to say, Living Social, as, again, you guys haven't heard of them, the company that we were trying to sell into imploded, and I was left holding the bag. And my investors who were like, forced me to sell once the deal collapsed, what did they do? They turned and looked at me and said, so what are you going to do now? We're not going to put any more money in this. And I was like, shit. So if you think selling is easy, you read about acqui-hires on the tech news, and there's all the trolls in the comments, and they're like, oh, it's so easy to sell your company. Yeah, it's not easy to sell your company. The best way to sell your company is build something of value, and that's hard to do when you're running around trying to sell your shit. So focus on building something useful. Misalignment. Oh, this is probably the toughest one. So I still remember one day when we had gotten into sort of my VP of marketing had come down, and she was very excited, and she said, hey, Brett, we got accepted into this other conference. We won, we won. And I was like, great. But in the back of my head, I was thinking, this is so exhausting. To be a startup that actually makes it, you have to win every time. You can't just win half the time. You can't just win, 1 out of 3. You have to win 9 out of 10 times just to have a chance to survive. So with the stakes that high, with it that high of a bar you have to reach, any sort of misalignment in your organization, misalignment meaning not you and your team not being on the same page, you and your investors not being on the same page, you and your customers not being on the same page, the slightest misalignment can sink you. So we had started out of an incubator. So an incubator that I helped build called App Fund provided our initial funding. And to be absolutely clear, they provided the initial capital that got us off the ground, and they were influential in moving us forward throughout our business. That said, because this one small company who had put in a couple $100,000 owned nearly 70% of the company, it created massive complications down the line. From day-to-day decisions about, who should we hire or what's an employment contract, to existential questions about, when should we sell the company. Oftentimes we were fighting each other, and sometimes we were just completely on different pages. The most tragic example, in my opinion, of the misalignment that we were dealing with was toward the end of the company, after our failure to sell to Living Social, I had found new investors that wanted to invest a new round into Sonar and reboot the company. And they provided this very difficult term sheet called a pay-to-play. Basically, the new investors were going to come in and say, hey, old investors, either put in more money or get the hell out of the way. And so this was our only chance to reboot the company. The old investors said no. So we sat on a term sheet to raise another $1.5 million for 30 days, completely at loggerheads. And the new investors came to me and they said, Brett, you have 48 hours. You have 48 hours to take it or leave it, this deal. Now, this is the project I had spent the past 3 years of my life evangelizing, and I have 48 hours before these new investors are going to go away. I had already put all of my personal money, spent $60,000 of my own money, my entire life savings. I hadn't taken a salary for over a year, and I couldn't get these guys to the same table, right? And in a desperate attempt, a gambit to save the company, I go to my old investors and I say, listen, you don't have to take this deal, as you are in control, as you so frequently tell me, right? But take this deal and let me get back to work and try to make a win for us, or don't take it, but I'm going to leave. So either take the deal or I'm going to leave. And they said, see you later. And you know what I did? I left. Shortly thereafter, the entire company collapsed. The team left. After the team left, no one could sell it. And I basically cursed these motherfuckers every night. And it took me a while. I had to take off the entire summer because they had just destroyed my baby. They basically threw my baby out with the bathwater, they say. But upon some reflection, there's a great quote. One of my favorite quotes is from this guy called John Burroughs, and he goes, a man isn't a failure until he begins to point the finger at someone else. And so probably the hardest learning for me in Sonar was my job. I lost the most when I couldn't get my new and old investors to agree on something. Like, no one lost more than me. And my job as CEO was to get everyone to the table. And I failed in that. My job was to figure out a way of getting these two people together, and I failed. So the lesson here is that, avoid bad partnerships. Do not get into bed with people that you don't intimately trust. But inevitably, that's going to happen. And so, either make it work or move on quickly. All right. So the last section is just about people. Okay, how do you get off the ground? So there's a piece of common startup advice is, only work with A+ people, only work with the best people. Have you guys heard that advice before, right? Okay, so the problem with that is that works great if you're like a successful entrepreneur that's raised millions of dollars, right? For the rest of us, it's going to be hard to get the best people in the world to work for us, and if we haven't proven ourselves. So in the beginning, you got to, find diamonds in the rough. I remember we lost our first engineer who was a Google engineer. He ended up taking another job. I was very upset. But later, I ended up finding another iOS developer who wasn't that experienced, but we got him on board, and he was instrumental to getting our V1 out. Right? And so in the beginning, you're going to need to find people that will work with you, that are aligned, get moving, and then as you build something of value, you can upgrade the team. All right. Culture. So we had a great team at Sonar. I mean, we had amazing engineers, amazing designers, really passionate people. Everyone put in all they could and then some, right? But our culture was more of an emergent property than something that we clearly defined, right? And this time doing it again, you can't leave culture up to chance, because culture is basically the co-founder that's there for you when you're not in the room. So if you're decisive, you're a good person, you listen, you make a team feel happy and welcome and let people, put their best foot forward. But what happens when you're not in the room? So culture is basically taking your personality as the founder, writing it down, and letting it be a clear voice when you're not in the room to help your people know how to act when you're not there. All right. So finally, what kills startups? A lot of people think it's when they run out of money. I don't think that's it. Startups die when people let go. When their founders let go. Otherwise, you'll be surprised. I came home for 6 months. 6 months, every 2 weeks, I would come home and I would put my head in my hands like this, and my girlfriend would say, what's wrong with you? And I would say, I have 11 days to find $25,000. 11 days to find $25,000. And the first time that happened, I was like, I'm fucked. I'm screwed. There's no way this is going to happen. But you would be surprised. Every 2 weeks, I would find $25,000 more. For 6 months. The only thing that killed us was when I finally decided, this final juncture, when I had gotten the term sheets, when I had a plan to reboot the company, and I was in this misalignment, I realized, you know what? It's not worth it. Even though we've all invested this much in this company, we all stand a better chance if we step away, concede the battle, and come back and win the war. So after Sonar imploded, I had an opportunity. The new investors wanted to basically reinvest and start a brand new company and put me in it. We had pivoted from this consumer play into this sort of B2B ad tech play that harvested all of your data and then used it to target you with ads. Scary. Ripped all the mobile data off of, looked at the apps on your phone, looked at where you went, looked at what Wi-Fi networks you use, looked at which phone calls you made, and then used that to target you with real-time ads, push notifications. Investors were falling all over themselves to invest in this. And I thought about it. I had a good idea that was valuable. I had the right team in place to do it, but I didn't do it. And why is that? It's because, startups are long. They take 5 to 7 years. And did I really want to spend the next 7 years of my life stealing your personal data and using it to target you with ads? No. Life is short. Choose something that matters to you. And the final part is, I remember the New Year's before Sonar imploded, I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to keep doing this until I die. I am never going to stop doing Sonar. I'm never going to do it. So my goal was to learn. I thought I was going to be persistent. But what I realized after it imploded and I decided to walk away, that I didn't learn persistence from Sonar. I learned resilience. And so now I'm starting a new startup. We've already got 6 people, great engineers from Google. We're building something great to help people find jobs that they love. And so the real matter is that if, as my father used to say, you ain't beat if you don't quit. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
It takes a lot of courage to talk about the failures. I dig your t-shirt. So what's up with Sonar right now? Because it's still up on the App Store. Are you still hoping for some luck? Or
So when I walked away in May, Sonar, I don't have control over it. I mean, that was part of the problem. I do not own the company. So I can't tell you what the owners are planning on doing with it. Sorry. I'm actually legally not allowed to tell you. Anyone else?
I guess as a founder, you constantly get a lot of emails and calls from some guys, and they tell you, let's do that, let's do this, and they propose you a partnership. How do you recognize that some guys can bring a value and who cannot? How do you sort these emails and calls?
So one of my favorite quotes is from Steve Jobs. He says, focus is saying no to 1,000 good ideas. And I think that startups are very similar to that. People might have great ideas, but you have to focus on what is your course, what is your vision. And so when someone comes along and they provide something that fits perfectly in your vision, they actually move you forward along the path that you have seen, then that's really the only time to consider a partnership. Anyone that's going to pull you in this direction or that, you be polite and you say, I'll get back to you.
Hi, Brett. Thanks for your speech. I have a question about, you said that you haven't got any salary for a year, and my question is, who paid for your bills?
How did I eat?
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things I've learned is if you keep an incredibly low cost basis, personally, I live in a very tiny apartment in New York that I share with 2 other people. And so I basically lived off of some money I had made in a prior career, investment banking. Now, when I'm doing my new thing, I've basically consult 1 day a week, and that provides me enough money to sort of feed myself and keep going. So I think people sort of they always overestimate how much they need to survive. And so as long as you stay focused on, what your priorities are and not spending money elsewhere, then you can, you'd be surprised. I think a lot of people think they need more than they do, but when you test yourself, the human spirit, the human body can just keeps going. You'd be surprised. People will show up and give you food. Your friends will feel bad for you. They'll buy you dinner. I mean, surround yourself with nice people. It works well.
Hi, Brett. Thank you for a great talk. How long it took for you to recover from the failure? And what are you working on next? Thank you.
So, after I had quit, I still had different investors, new investors, old investors, trying to get me to come back and do it. And I finally, once it was clear that they were, this expression to plow salt into the earth. If you guys, when you plow salt in the earth, nothing can grow from it anymore, right? So once it became clear that certain people in my old investors were just plowing salt in the earth, I finally threw up my hands and I said, okay, I have to go. And so I took off and I went home for the summer. I'm from a small mid-Atlantic beach town. Well, I had nothing to do, so I got up every morning at 9 a.m., I went surfing, and then I did exercises, push-ups and sit-ups for about an hour, and then I would play basketball for about 3 hours, and then I would take a run on the beach, and then I would go surfing again at the end of the day, and then I would pass out, and then I would do it again. So I did that for like a month and a half, to the point where one day I woke up and got out of bed, and I was like, my stomach kind of hurts. And I was like, what's going on here? I can't really run. So I finally, went to the doctor and he was like, oh yeah, okay, feel right here. And I was like, okay, how does that feel? It feels smooth. He goes, feel right here. And I was like, he's like, what does that feel like? He's like, a tattered flag. Just like I had completely shredded like my entire stomach just from like anxious, like stress, from like trying to like take my mind off of it. So it took me the entire summer of just decompressing to like start again. And so I had told myself I would take off the whole summer, and then on Labor Day, which is like September or whatever 2nd or something, I said, okay, I will start again. So it took 3 months, and then basically people came up to me. It's funny, I wrote a blog post. So this was Alex found me on a blog post that I had written about this that had gotten translated into Russian. And it's funny because I wrote this post about how badly I had screwed up. And the next day, I got 10 job offers. I got 10 job offers.
An invitation to CodeFest.
And an invitation to CodeFest, right? So, like, you'd be surprised. And some very senior people wrote to me and they said, hey, you know, that's great. Like, I only invest in people that have really screwed things up before. So, you know, I think there's a perception that, you know, failure, you know, is going to haunt you for the rest of your life. And I'm not going to say that all you need to do is fail really badly and tell everyone about it and everything's going to work out. But what I will say is the truth is you are always only as good as whatever you currently have built, right? So I could fail 10 times, but then if I built something, you know, if I built the next Facebook or if I built the next Google, right? And I came to you guys or if I came to investors and I said, hey, look at what I've built, they would not care about the 10 things I had screwed up because, you know, I have the next Google in my hands. So whenever you're worried, as long as you are confident that you can turn nothing into something, then you can just keep going. All right.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Small question. How to choose a good investor? Few guidelines. How you decide that this investor is better than that?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think a lot of first-time entrepreneurs, when you're starting, you don't know how the game works, and you're so desperate to get money that you're like, well, it's all green. I don't know, what color are rubles? Blue? Different. They're all blue and pink and okay, they're all rainbow, right? All the rubles are rainbow, right? Like what color? As long as the right color rubles, then I'll take it, right? That's usually the mindset. So it's hard to tell the difference between good ones and bad ones, but having done it, the difference between a good investor and a bad investor is it's like night and day. I had some investors that put in a ton of money that ended up being completely useless, and actually during our hardest times, they weren't there for us. And then I had other investors that put in tiny bits of money. You know, they had put in $50,000 of the $2 million that we had raised, and they were there every day. The day Sonar blew up, they called me at 8 a.m. the next morning, and they said, what's going on? I told them what happened, and this guy who had 80 other companies that he had invested in, he said, you know, okay, I'm on this. I'm going to spend all day working on this. So I think it's hard to tell. But the only way you can really vet it is by talking to people and getting honest feedback from people you trust. But the difference between a good investor and a bad investor is 1,000x. Okay, so one more.
Yeah.
One more. This is the benefit of sitting in front.
Okay, so thanks for your insights. I wonder if you could turn back time, what one thing would you do differently and how would you do it?
So many things to do differently. It's hard to pick. The one thing I would do differently is sort of like I said, we had a lot of I viewed my situation with having certain investors that, on paper had control of the company. On paper, they legally owned it and they could say whatever they could do. It said that they could fire me. It said that they could sell the company whenever they wanted. In retrospect, I actually had more control than the papers said I do. When I walked away, the company fell apart, and I think that I would have leveraged that. I would have been more confident of my importance to the company, and I would have used that to control the investors better and get them into a place that would have worked. So I think the moral of that story is, in the beginning of a pre-product market fit startup, all it is the founder and his dream and the people he surrounds himself with. And so you shouldn't be bullied by, competitors or, investors. You should have confidence in yourself. So thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Have an awesome time. Thank you.